Hello and welcome back to video number 7 for the Lake Personal Lab. We need to patch the LM44. I've recovered from my crash. Everything is hunky-dory. And we're going to get Dante working because Dante is the way Lake prefers to send audio between devices. So over to Lake, and we're going to patch the outputs and the inputs for the LM44 system processor. So I'm going to go into modules view here and select any one of our inputs on this frame here on our LM44 system processor. We're going to go into IO config, and you can see over here on your right that the 4 Mesa inputs for the 4 channels, left, right, and subs and fills. And let's get Dante let's work on transmission first. So we got to go over here to the Dante configuration and click on this little magnifying glass. And we're going to start here on the device tab and going to turn on Dante. Dante is not on by default, even though it is the preferred way of working for the system. And we're going to go over to transmit because we're going to send out our outputs as Dante. So let's turn on transmit outputs. And we're going to label our channels. Now, what are these channels? These are actually the labels that are going to show up in the Dante controller. So you'll see these. And we'll call one, what is this called? Mains left, and we'll call 2 mains right, and of course 3 is subs, and 4 is fills. Now we're going to go one step further. It's going to help us out later on. We're actually going to make redundant Dante channels. So mains left backup, and these are here in case something fails and the other ones work. And the amps, as you'll see in a moment, benefit from this setup. So let's just do it. Mains left back up, mains right back up, subs back up. I gotta tell you, I actually typically spell backup without a C in it. I don't know why. I've been doing that a long time. Man, I'm having failure. Subs back up, and we've got fills back up. So we have set up our processing outputs, but we need to actually make sure we're sending to them. We've got these 8 channels here. And to do that, let's go over and look at our frames and click on the output configuration, the magnifying glass, bring it up. And you can see that the outputs of this processor are automatically going to send out AES, and that's good because we're going to use AES as a backup. And they're automatically going to send out analog, which is good. And then there's Dante. And Dante, they are automatically sending out channels 1, 2, 3, 4, exactly what we want. But let's actually configure and set up our backup channels as well. Now they're sending out 1 and 5, 2 and 6, 3 and 7, 4 and 8, etc., etc. So there, we have patched our outputs. That's all good. Patching inputs is a bit different, a bit more interesting. If you never turn on Dante, the system processor will default, and of course we turned it on here with this device Dante enabled. If you don't turn that on, the system processor will default to analog inputs. But the moment you turn Dante on, it defaults to Dante inputs. And if you look here at the list of the 8 inputs to this processor, it's going to source natively to Dante 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's its priority. And if it doesn't get Dante clock, it automatically instantaneously switches over to an AES input, channels 1, 2, 3, 4, because the LM44 has AES inputs as well. And if it doesn't get AES clock, therefore no signal, it automatically switches to analog. And so this sets up a situation where you're in this particular PA system, you want to source, you're going to have the console send out analog into the LM44 using a left bus, right bus, a subs on aux, and a matrix fed fills mix. And so you needed to do analog. So this dives into kind of a crazy part of the program. Sorry, wrong thing to click. Click the yellow thing here. And how do I do this? I thought that was in the right spot to begin with. I'm sorry. Click into the inputs tab. What have I done wrong? What am I doing wrong? Where is it? I actually had to click on the list here to dive into the priorities. And this interesting screen shows up. And what this is showing you is this is how you change the priorities for the default inputs to the system. As you can see, for input 1, it defaults to Dante channel 1. Default it's option 2 is doesn't have anything assigned. Option 3 is AES, and option 4 is analog. We want it to be analog input, so press the force button. Just go to all 4 of these tabs, press force. Now you're just forcing the unit into analog input and to disregard Dante. Okay, that's all we're doing. I'm going to close that window. And it doesn't really even show that. It does tell you. It says right there, mode, force 2. It's no longer force 4. It's no longer an auto. It's forced to source from priority 4. So that's good. That is what we needed to do. The LM44 ins and outs are routed. Let's do the amplifiers now, okay? So let's go home. And I want to go back to my instructions and just want to double check what's going on. We've done all of this. And we are down here patching the amp, and the amps are pretty simple. So let's go into the amps. So back to Dante, and we're going to go to mod. This time we're going to select, we've got 2 amps to work with. The mains amp, that's frame 1. We'll select that. Home screen's going to open up EQ. Mistake there. I need to go into modules view. Select the first frame, modules mains left. Go into IO config. We're now looking at our mains amplifier. And we need to turn Dante on, just like we did before. So we're going to click the magnifying glass, and please turn Dante on. This time we're receiving Dante, so we need to go to the Receive tab, and nothing is showed on the screen. And that is because you actually do the patching. This is the Lake's proprietary version of Dante Controller. Much like the Yamaha CL3 has its own Dante Controller built in, Lake does as well. And since we're running in virtual, you can't see any of the Dante devices here. You can't do any of the Dante patches. So if it were me, I would just do the patching in Dante Controller anyway, and I would ignore this screen. But that's what needs to happen is you need to patch. Think about this for a moment, and I'll go back. You need to patch the LM44 channels 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, 6, 7, and 8, you need to patch them to these different amplifiers, right, using Dante Controller. So going back, we've still got this channel mains left selected. Go back into I/O. We've turned Dante on. We've done the Dante patches in Dante Controller. And here's the cool thing. By default, I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong processor. By default, the amplifiers, we need to look at amplifiers, silly. Modules, amplifiers. We've selected the mains left. Let's go into IO config. By default, the input configuration of the amplifiers is exactly what we want. Check this out. Priority 1, it will automatically sense Dante channel 1. If that fails, the amplifier will source to Dante channel 5, our backup. If that fails, it will source to AES1. If that fails, it will source to analog. So all 4 channels of the amp are automatically configuring to the correct things we want. We don't have to configure the outputs because they're not going anywhere, Dante. They're only going out power, and we did that earlier on. So all we had to do with these amplifiers is turn on Dante and go to Dante Controller and patch the controller, patch the LM44 to the amplifiers. There's one more thing we need to do. Let's exit I/O for a second. We've only configured the mains frame. We actually need to configure the subs and fills frame. That's a separate amplifier. I'm going to select that. Go into I/O config and repeat exactly what I did a moment ago, which is go to Dante config and go to my device, turn on Dante. And now we would go to Dante Controller on our computer and send the LM44 outputs 1 through 8 to this amplifier inputs Dante 1 through 8. Hope that wasn't too confusing. This is definitely the darker part of Dante Controller, but it's pretty fascinating because it kind of ties together what we know about Dante and Lake together. I'm definitely going to save right now. Hopefully it doesn't crash this time. System store recall, and I'm going to store system, and it's personal Eric. I'm going to store on top of it, and I'm all good. See you on the next video.